So everyone has heard of the legend of Bigfoot, the tall ape-like creature of many different urban legends. But did you know that Arizona may have its own Bigfoot-like creature to deal with? Known as the Mogollon monster, this creature inhabits the Mogollon Rim of Arizona. If you can't tell, that's where they got the really creative name for it. And it has also been reported to be seen near the Grand Canyon. So, what does this creature look like? Well, as I mentioned before, the Mogollon monster is basically just the Bigfoot of Arizona. They pretty much did a little copy and paste with the description, but still, for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna give you the description anyways. So the Mogollon monster is reported to be anywhere from 7 to even 10 feet tall. Its entire body is covered with dark reddish-brown fur. However, one thing I want to say is some reports have said its hair was more white or gray instead of darker reddish-brown. So I don't know what that means. Maybe that one's just an older version or something like that. It is also described to have ape-like features, so exactly like Bigfoot is described. It is said that its footprints are almost 22 inches long. While I was doing research for this video, one funny thing that kept being mentioned in descriptions of the Mogollon monster was how bad it smelled. People kept comparing it to really nasty things. Like, one reports that it smelled like a skunk, and some other people described it as smelling like rotten fish or meat. Which, I mean, I guess it's a good way to tell if it's near you. However, another way you could recognize it is by the noises it makes. It is said to make piercing and deafening howls and strange screams and growls that don't sound like any other known animal. So now let's get into some of the stories involving the origins of this creature. So pretty much all the stories involving the origins of this creature have connections to the indigenous people that live in this area, specifically the Apaches. This does make sense because the Mogollon Rim is located in indigenous land. In the modern day, it's near the Fort Apache Reservation, which is home to the White Mountain Apache tribe. The most common origin story of this creature always has something to do with the creature being a former indigenous person angry and bent on revenge. Some of them have this creature as a chief who through some form of magic transformed himself to this creature to either scare away his former clan for some reason or terrorize all people that it encounters. Although that is the most common story, it is not the only one. My personal favorite story has the creature as a European settler who murdered an innocent indigenous woman. As punishment for doing this, he was hung from a tree by his hands, stretched to a height of 8 feet, before he was then skinned alive and left to die. Then cursed, his spirit continues to wander the woods as this creature. Like, goddamn, this is one of the most messed up punishments you could have think of for someone. But the reason I prefer this one instead of the other one, well, other than just how, like, actually insane this story is because, the monster isn't just, presumably innocent Apache person being blamed for this creature. Like, this guy just straight up probably killed an innocent woman and then had this messed up thing done to him as a cause, even though this punishment is still absolutely crazy. The last origin story of this creature that I want to go over comes from a newspaper publication all the way back in 1903. The Arizona Republican published a story in the newspaper titled Grand Canyon Wildman. An additional attraction has been provided at the Great Gorge. This provided an interview with a man known as I.W. Stevens, who apparently encountered the creature. So keep this man in mind, as we will get back to him soon with his encounter he had with the creature. But for now, we're just going to go over the origin story he gave. So this is the direct quote he gave to the newspaper. Tradition records that years ago, hostile indigenous people captured 3 men, bound them to logs far up the canyon, and cast them adrift on the swollen river. It may be that this wild creature is one of those unfortunate men who by chance freed himself and escaped death, but was made insane by his awful experience. I find this story to be interesting because, other than the obvious racism present in this story, well, it's from the 1900s, so what do you expect? It seems to be the earliest story about this creature, and you can kind of see where the two other stories we talked about kind of branched off of this one and went their own ways. However, what I bet you are more interested in is the encounter that Stevens himself claimed to have had with the creature. As far as I know, he is the first person to have reported seeing this creature. However, the creature seems to have been part of urban legends way before Stevens ever had this interview. In fact, the article that gives the story of Stevens proves this. It starts off by saying, many strange stories have been told of these wild men of the Grand Canyon of Colorado, and while some persons have credited these weird tales, they have for the most part been regarded as the ingenious inventions of imaginative travelers and have passed into tradition as such. Stevens, however, is definitely one of the people who believe in it, though. So let's just go through his encounter together. Stevens starts out by describing how he was taking a trip up the Grand Canyon as far as he could on his boat. When he got to the end of the river, he got out and was admiring his surroundings. I hauled my boat upon the sand and got ready to examine the rock walls. The first thing that attracted my attention was the imprint of bare feet in the sand. At the time, Stevens didn't think much of these tracks, thinking they were probably made by some indigenous person living in the area. For a while, nothing else strange happened to him, however, he eventually would have another sighting. The third day of my stay, I saw the head of a man on a bench of rocks on the north side of the river. Evidently, he was seated on the edge of a cliff some distance above my camp. He decided to try and go explore where he saw this man. I finally succeeded in approaching closer to the point. I saw, sitting on a large boulder, a man with long white hair and matted beard that reached to his knees. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that it was sometimes described as having gray hair and sometimes brown hair. Even though Stevens describes his hair as white right now, later when he gets a better look, he'll say it was more gray. The creature was unaware of my approach, and I gazed upon him for some moments unobserved. He was about 50 yards away and in full view. He wore no clothing, and upon his talon-like fingers were claws at least 2 inches long. A coat of gray hair nearly covered his body, with here and there a spot of dirty skin showing. I had found the wild man of the rocks. While unfortunately for my man Stevens, some rocks and an animal made noise, then the creature turned directly to look at him. The creature turned his face towards me. Horrors! What a face it was! Seared and burned brown by the sun with fiery green eyes. The creature then proceeds to leap up and run towards Stevens. Unfortunately for Stevens, the creature was also carrying a big club, which he described as big enough to kill an ox. I am a poor runner, so I stood my ground. When the creature was within about 15 yards of me, I raised my rifle to fire, thinking to cripple him. I mean, not to hate on Stevens, but in this little 1v1 situation, I'm probably putting my money on the creature, not him. That's all I'm saying. Luckily for Stevens, though, the creature got distracted. As I glanced along the barrel, I heard a growl just above the wild man. He also had heard the growl and braced himself for the shock. I drew a hasty bead on the cougar and pressed the trigger. When the smoke had cleared away, the mother cougar lay dead where the wild man stood. The man himself had disappeared. The 2 young cougars were still on the rock. So obviously, Stevens used this opportunity to just try and get the fuck out of there. I hastily retreated to the boat, where I found everything I had left it. I shoved the boat off and drifted towards camp, which was near the cougars. There lay the old cougar where she had fallen. The wild man was standing over the 2 cubs, which were also dead, he having beat the life out of them with a club. He stood a moment gazing on the carcasses, then got down on hands and knees and drank the warm blood as it flowed from the death wounds. The sight sickened me. I stood up in the boat and yelled, The man sprang to his feet, took a long look at me, then fled up from ledge to ledge until he reached the fourth ledge, where he stopped. Here he flourished his club again and screamed the wildest, most unearthly screech I have ever heard, then turned and sprang up the craggy wall of the canyon. And that was the last time Stevens ever saw the Mogollon monster. You know, personally, this is my favorite encounter anybody has ever had with this creature. I just love the amount of detail Stevens was able to give in his story, but don't worry, this isn't the only story people have had with this creature. This story is given by cryptozoologist Don Davis, who claimed to have an encounter with the creature when he was a child. So in the 1940s, Don was on a Boy Scouts trip in the Mogollon Rim area. He and the rest of the Boy Scouts decided to set up a camp at Tonto Creek. In the middle of the night, he was woken up by the sound of something rummaging around the campsite. Well, Don was in his sleeping bag when the creature approached him and stood directly over him. Don then just hid in his sleeping bag until the creature lost interest and left. Which, I mean, to be fair, he was a kid. What else could he do about a 10-foot monster? I would have done the same thing. I can't blame him. No, so like I said before, since this creature is said to live on the Apache land, it isn't surprising at all that lots of them have their own stories and encounters with this creature. Specifically, the town of White River in the reservation has many residents that claim that they have seen this creature. Paulette Altaha, I'm really hoping I didn't mess up that name, who is a spokeswoman for the White Mountain Apaches, said that we're not prone to easily talk to outsiders, but there has been more sightings than ever before. It cannot be ignored any longer. Another resident of White River, Marjorie Grimes, decided to share her encounter as well. This encounter actually takes place back in 2004, so this is the most modern encounter we've had so far. So in the summer of 2004, she was driving from the town of Sibiku to White River when she spotted the creature. It was all black and it was tall. The way it walked, it was taking big strides. I put on the brakes and raced back and looked between the two trees where it was, and it was gone. She is just one of many that have claimed to have seen this monster nearby. Another person, Ray Burnett, who is the lieutenant for the tribal police in the area, confirms this, as the police have got many calls from people who think that they've seen the creature. He said a couple of times they've seen this creature looking through the windows. They're scared when they call. So the Mogollon monster seems to be something of common knowledge with the White Mountain Apaches. In fact, they have even investigated the creature themselves. Investigators were called to the scene of a reported sighting, where they had found footprints and hair supposedly left by the creature. The tribal police even decided to make plaster casts of the footprints and sent samples of the hair for analysis. Unfortunately for us, not much was learned from the hair samples because all the scientists did was prove that the hair wasn't from a human. They never did any further tests to try and figure out what kind of animal it could have been. But in my opinion, to be honest, you can't really blame them. Because imagine you're a scientist and randomly one day you get a hair sample and it just asks to prove this could be from, essentially a Bigfoot-like creature. It would probably be a little hard to take this seriously. Anyways, but seriously, it is unfortunate that this is where the test stopped, because we could have actually learned more information about what this creature possibly could be. Okay, so oh my god, this is the part I've wanted to talk about the most, so we're getting right into this one. So this guy has a connection to the White Mountain Apache sightings, but before we get into that, I just want to quickly go over who this man is, a little side tangent, but trust me, this is definitely something. Born 1949, Tom Biscardi is a cryptozoology enthusiast, internet radio host, and self-described real Bigfoot hunter. Which sounds really funny, to be honest, but as someone who's making videos online about random shit, I can't make fun of that much. But what I can make fun of him for is all the hoaxes this guy's been caught being part of. So let's just get right into that. So Tom has gotten himself caught in at least 2 different hoaxes related to his search for Bigfoot. Back in 2005, Tom appeared on the radio program Coast to Coast AM and claimed he was 98% sure that he and his team would be able to capture a Bigfoot. He then appeared around a month later again, saying that no, this time he actually knew the location of a captured Bigfoot. So then he said he would show people, but only through his webcam service that you have to pay $14 to view. So, already sounded like a scam here. But it gets worse. However, the day he was apparently gonna show people, he was like, oh no, guys, actually, I was tricked by this woman who said she had the Bigfoot captured. And I was gonna show you guys. But so I was actually the one scammed, unfortunately. So, like, I can't actually show you guys. My bad. So, like, obviously, people who paid for it were mad at him. And he was forced to offer refunds for people who paid for it. And as far as I know, those people actually got the refund. So, at least there wasn't that much harm by this scam. But then, Tom couldn't help himself. Just 3 years later, in 2008, he got himself caught in another scam. So, a little backstory to this one. See, there were these 2 guys named Matthew Witten and Rick Dyer who claimed they had found the body of a Bigfoot while hiking through the mountains of Georgia and were keeping the body in a freezer in an undisclosed location. Not only that, they claimed to have seen 3 more of these creatures when they found the body. They claimed it was 7'7" and 500 pounds. So anyways, what does Tom have to do with these people? Well, he actually teamed up with these 2 to help promote it. The 3 of them held a press conference where they showed apparent photos of the creature. Tom himself even assured the media that it was real, and is quoted as saying, "Last weekend, I touched it. I measured its feet. I felt its intestines." Saying he himself can confirm it's real. Well, unfortunately for him, later Matthew and Rick both came out and admitted that it was actually a rubber costume and their whole story was just complete bullshit. So what did Tom do when he heard this? Well, when Tom heard this, he claimed that he actually was a victim as well, and these men deceived him, and that he's going to be seeking justice against them. But, anyways, enough of bullying our witness guy. Let's just get back to the main topic. So, what possibly happened for this guy to be connected to this Bigfoot ripoff in Arizona? Well, surprisingly, Tom and his team were actually invited to come out and investigate the sightings by the White Mountain Apache.
So they asked me if I would come out, and they said, be our guest. We have a hotel out here, and we have our own buffet at the hotel, and you and your team are invited to stay. We want to make sure you're in comfort, but during the day, we want you to come out and find out exactly what's going on.
Tom is also quoted as saying that the Apache land is an untapped resource for investigators, and saying that there are way too many reports coming out of here of seeing this creature. So, what did Tom and his crew do when they actually got there? Well, first thing they did is they went on KNNB, which is the local radio station for the area, and they took calls from locals talking about their experiences. You're about to hear one of the stories that Tom was told about.
The black and white comes out on the area to the woman's house, and as she's turning the corner, she sees the creature start to bolt and run like hell. She's running after it, and here the creature is running side of the squad car, just keeping up with it. And she was telling us the whole story on how scared she was.
Tom coming to hear these stories seems to have actually turned out to be a good thing for the community. As we mentioned before, Kali Alhata, who's the spokeswoman for the White Mountain Apaches, said, because of people doubting them before, they never came forward. But now with the help of Tom Biscardi and his team, they've come out here and our people are beginning to open up. So next, in an interview, Tom said he also spoke to a local shaman about the creature.
So she was telling about the howls that was going on, and some of the dogs and cats being missed, and the chickens that were being missed during the night. And this is what these creatures were apparently eating.
However, Tom did not just interview people. He and his team actually did their own investigations into the creature while they were there. So what did they do? They strapped motion activated cameras with night vision on trees and set up listening devices. He also apparently made noises that would attract the creature, whatever the hell that means. Unfortunately, they did not capture any footage or noises from the creature. However, Tom does have a pretty interesting story from his investigation.
And because we had followed a trail of one back of this one house up, and it goes in traverses up into the mountains, where we found the bones of a dog. And after it ate it, it had stacked the bones up, believe it or not. Now, what kind of animal does that? Can't be a cougar, because they'd tear the hell out of it. Can't be a bear, they do the same thing. So, and then we'd find these giant prints of these creatures around their area where they were doing this. And that's how we primarily got involved.
So yeah, guys, that's about it for the Mogollon Monster video. I hope you enjoyed. This was really fun to make, and I'll definitely be making more like cryptid type videos in the future. Also, I'm thinking about maybe some like true crime stuff, some weird history stuff. So if any of that stuff possibly interests you, like please subscribe and like and comment. That would really help out as, I'm a new YouTuber. I'm trying to start my channel. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, like, comment, subscribe. Other than that, peace. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.